Okay, it looks like our number of participants is stabilized, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody. My name is Matt Enzio. I'm CDOT's Communications Director. Just a note, at the top, we have 3 presenters, starting with our Executive Director, Shoshana Liu. We will be able to take questions from the media after we've provided an update. If there are any local partners on the line with us today, would appreciate letting media get their questions through first. Just that's the primary purpose of this briefing, and we know we're running up on afternoon deadlines as well, and want to accommodate that. For any questions, please use the raise hand or the chat function. Most of us are familiar with those by now, and we'll keep track of those as we go. With that, I'll hand things over to our Executive Director, Shoshana Liu.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And I want to start today's briefing with some thank yous at the end of a challenging week for everybody. First, thank you to all of you on the call for the continued attention that all of you are paying to this matter and to keeping the public updated in real time. To our neighbors and local partners, we know how hard this is, particularly for the communities on the West Slope, but really for large stretches of Colorado, and really tremendously appreciate everyone bearing with us as we get the situation resolved as quickly as possible. A big thanks to our team, for an incredible effort over the past couple of weeks, and you'll hear directly from the incident command team about the progress. But having seen it over the last few days relative to a week ago, it's nothing short of incredible how much has been accomplished in a short period of time. There's a long way to go, but a lot of progress to report on. And we are very much tracking the governor's goal of having it reopened on Saturday. And that's part of what you'll hear about today, are the steps that have happened and continue to happen to make that a reality. I would reiterate before turning it over to our incident commander, Mike Coolsby, that when it reopens, it will be in a one lane configuration. So there's going to be reduced speeds and a need for people to drive with extra care on the roadway. And, that will mean, keeping your eyes focused, moving forward. And there's a lot to see on the sides, but we're going to need drivers to be attuned to driving safely and in an attentive manner. Keeping slow, sticking to the speed limit, which is going to be slower than usual, and just being sort of mindful of driving in a work zone, which is what this is going to be for the next few months. Again, we are on track for the reopening to occur on the timeline we talked about the other day, which is Saturday, and working aggressively towards the timeline of Thanksgiving for the completion of the permanent repairs. And again, you'll hear more about where we are in the process of selecting partners to help build that project shortly. Matt, back to you.
Thanks, Shoshana. I'll hand things over now to our incident commander, Mike Coolsby. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, all. I'm going to keep my statement pretty brief and give you all the opportunity to hear from our Deputy Incident Commander and Deputy Chief Engineer, Keith Stefanik. But, a couple of things I'd like to point out is we've made major strides, both on the engineering plan side this week and on the maintenance side to get the canyon ready to open. I've been really grateful to have the department's Deputy Chief Engineer with us in the Incident Command to work with our engineering team here based in Glenwood. And I know there's a lot of technical stuff and there's a lot of interesting things that are going on. So I'm going to turn this over to Keith. So I'm pleased to give you all Keith Stefanik, the Deputy Incident Commander and Deputy Chief Engineer for CDOT. So Matt, I'm going to stop there and let Keith take over.
You bet. Thank you, Mike. Just to give everyone a little bit more information and background on exactly what occurred over the past few weeks out in the Glenwood Canyon. We encountered some of our most significant damage at milepost 123.5, which we call Blue Gulch. The events of July 30th and 31st really caused major damage to the infrastructure at that location. A lot of that infrastructure and that damage could not be seen visibly until we were able to get the debris, the material cleared from both of those lanes in order for our engineering inspection teams to take a look and see what that damage was. That occurred on Sunday. We were able to get teams in all this week. All of our inspections this week have shown that the remaining infrastructure in that location is structurally sound. It will, both the westbound deck and the eastbound embankment will support one lane in each direction. We ran through a lot of inspections and to back that up. Staff Bridge, our geotech group, FHWA, we all looked at it, and we're very confident that can meet those expectations for Saturday morning. So some of the work that has been occurring over the last few days, we've made tremendous progress on getting some super sacks filled on the north side of I-70 in order to provide temporary rockfall protection in that area. That was about 150 bags, 1.5 ton or 3,000 pounds per sack. So that was a great accomplishment, and that'll provide a layer of protection for the traveling public for any small to medium rocks that come down through that Blue Gulch area. We were also able to get some temporary pavement placed at westbound mile marker 123.5, temporary barrier, getting that ready for opening, as we alluded to, the governor's goal of Saturday afternoon. Down on the eastbound side at milepost 123.5, crews were able to reestablish the embankment of 100 linear foot section of roadway, get that up to grade with rock embankment, some class 6 aggregate base course, and then also about 8 inches of asphalt pavement. Our crews have just completed that asphalt pavement. We are now placing barrier down there in anticipation of tomorrow's opening. It was a tremendous amount of work accomplished by our CDOT maintenance crews and an emergency contractor that we put in. But again, we're not out of the clear. We have to get very good cooperation from Mother Nature and make sure she is not establishing more events that place material down on the viaduct. We also need to make sure that we can get an emergency contractor in here to do the repairs necessary to get 2 lanes open in each direction. We just had a job showing today with approximately a little over 10 contractors. Bids will be received next week with hopes of awarding a contract on Friday, August 20th, I believe that is, with the hopes of them starting on the 23rd. So our goal is to have those 2 lanes in each direction by Thanksgiving. So again, just like Director Liu said, we appreciate your patience while we work out there. Throughout the canyon, there will be daytime lane closures outside of 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. in order for our crews to continue removing some of the material from behind the barrier and providing a lot more cleaning efforts along that corridor. We find it very important to get a minimum 1 lane in each direction while we do that. So once again, successful week. We anticipate opening this up tomorrow afternoon to meet the governor's goal. And I would just like to thank everyone for their patience. CDOT will open this. We will open it safely. That is our #1 goal. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
Thanks, Keith. And I think Director Liu would just have a closing thought or two from you before we get to questions.
Sure. I would just end where I began by reminding everyone that safety needs to be our top priority as we move from a closure to a work zone. We really want to reiterate that motorists need to be mindful of driver behavior, anticipating that the speed limit will likely be 35 miles per hour. So prepare for slower traffic and be respectful of each other and respectful of the speed limit. As I said, we're also, aware that this has been of great interest for, all of the obvious reasons to folks across the state. But seeing the damage and focusing on the damage instead of driving could create very dangerous conditions in the canyon. So, we really ask everyone to keep your eyes on the road and drive, with extraordinary care through this area. We'll also, to Keith's point, be bringing in a permanent contractor, quite soon, which means that this is going to be an active work zone with folks working on the road to get the road repaired to its permanent configuration as quickly as possible. But that also means that there's going to be, traffic closures that are part of a normal construction project, and all of the rules that normally apply when driving in a work zone. So, please, mind the cone zone, be respectful of other drivers and of the people working in the area to keep it safe and repair it to its permanent configuration. And, with that, I will turn it back to Matt. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Liu. Seeing a couple questions pop right away, and I know Marianne Goodland has had her virtual hand raised, so we'll start there. Go ahead, Marianne.
And I'm going to also ask the question that Patty Nieburg from AP is asking. What time are we looking at for Saturday for the reopening? Did you hear that?
Yes. So we are committed to, weather permitting, of course, having it opened by or before the afternoon timeline that we talked about the other day. We're hoping to beat the timeline, but we are still working on setting up all of the traffic configurations. So we'll probably be a little ways yet until we have a specific ETA, but no later than tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, thanks. Seeing a couple questions load up in the chat. Rob Hagan, are you able to unmute and ask just so that we can get it onto the recording as well? Appreciate that.
Yes, can you hear me?
You're a little soft, so if you could speak up, that's great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes, this is Rob Hagan with KREX5 News, Grand Junction. I was just wondering where the 11.6 million or the 10% of the emergency relief that was asked for, where that's been allocated and if it has been put to good use or if it's just purely reimbursement.
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about the emergency relief requested from the U.S. Department of Transportation. So what was submitted earlier this week was what's called the letter of interest for our overall request for emergency relief under Title 23, the funding for the Federal Highway Administration. That's an estimate of everything from the immediate needs that we've been going through over the last couple of weeks to get the road clear and open, to the construction project that's going to happen to repair the damaged areas, to a permanent configuration, to a placeholder for some of the resiliency improvements that we're looking at over the longer term. Under the Federal Highway Program, up to 10% of the total request can be asked for as what's called quick release, meaning that it's available on a front-loaded basis. Some of that will pay for reimbursing all of the work that our maintenance forces and partners have done over the last couple of weeks to get the road clear. Things like removing the material from the roadway, the emergency contract that Keith mentioned to fill the hole on the lower deck at 123.5, things like that. And it will remain available for the work that has to happen over the weeks and months to come, to get the road fixed. The ongoing portion, we will be providing more detailed assessments to the federal government to refine those over time pursuant to the way that this program works. And we're not yet able to draw down on those funds. All of the funding pursuant to Title 23 of the U.S. Code is reimbursable. That's the way federal highway funds work. So the way this works is we do it front-loading the expenses and then apply to the federal government for reimbursement.
Thank you, Executive Director Liu.
Thanks, Rob. In the chat, I'm seeing Crystal 93. So if the person from that outlet could go ahead and read your question out loud so we can get it on the recording. Thanks. And if they're not there, I'll go ahead and handle asking what has been done to mitigate future mudslides and rockfall.
I can take that one, Matt. So our geohazard group, the CDOT geohazard group, has been out to examine some of the major slide areas. We have looked for any loose material if that needs to be mitigated. We really didn't find a whole lot of loose material and are pretty comfortable where the reaches stand right now. But I will tell you, we do live in the state of Colorado, which is at high risk for rockfall protection, especially or rock falling up through the Rocky Mountains. So definitely always need to keep that on mind when traveling any of the interstates, roadways, state highways. throughout the Rocky Mountains, that there's always rockfall risk. But we will continue to look at this canyon. We're using a technology called LiDAR in order to map the canyon and see and compare that to the past history to see exactly how much damage was occurred over these events. So that is something that we will be taking a look at. We feel pretty confident right now that we've mitigated what we need to get the road open, but we will continue that assessment over the next several months to years. This was a very large event, a very high intensity event that we need to continue looking at the damage that has occurred from that event.
Thanks, Keith. And we want to flag for everyone that Tracy Truelove just added a link to an updated media kit for those of you who are looking for some elements to put things together. We can send that out separately as well, but just wanted to flag that for you. Trying to track these in order, I believe next we have Jesse Paul with his hand raised. Jesse, go ahead.
Hey, Matt. You guys mentioned that the road wouldn't be fully reopened until Thanksgiving and that the work wouldn't be done until then. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little further on, what that looks like and why the time frame is so long.
I can take that one as well. So the work that needs to occur is a very extensive infrastructure loss and infrastructure reconstruction at milepost 123.5. Basically, we need to reconstruct portions of the westbound deck. We lost the inside barrier. We lost the strands the structural strands that go across the interstate and tie if you're familiar with the Glenwood Canyon, there's a 6-foot cantilever section for the westbound shoulder section. We completely lost all of that parapet and railing. So that section of westbound I-70 there needs to be partially reconstructed or fully reconstructed in that area. And in order to keep traffic open, we need to construct that or phase that in almost in a half. So imagine shifting, there's really not enough room to shift 2 lanes around at one time. So we have to build the south half with the traffic to the north, and then build the shift traffic to the newly constructed south side, and then build that north segment. We also need to do that on the eastbound, that 100-foot section. So not only did we lose the roadway, we lost probably almost 50 foot of the retaining wall that's adjacent to the Colorado River. So all of that infrastructure through that area needs to be reconstructed. Like Director Liu said, we will need to be doing we will have that permanent single lane closure at 123.5. And then we'll also need to do some overnight closures in order to allow the contractor more access to pour concrete, to do some forming, to do some safety critical work. So we are taking a look and trying to limit those closures as much as we can, but we definitely will need to do that. This was just an absolutely tremendous infrastructure loss at 123.5. So we definitely need to take a look at that and take the phasing into consideration. So that's where you'll see why it will take a few months. We're hoping to exceed expectations and have that done prior to Thanksgiving, but that's the target we have right now.
And I would just add to that, just as you think about the geography, that the most severe damage is at milepost 123.5, and sort of the second most severe damage point is milepost 124.5. That's not anywhere near the whole balance of the canyon. Most of the area will be running pretty close to normal. There will basically just be a work zone as if you were doing a construction project, which is what will be occurring, in that general part of the canyon, but the rest of it will be running at a fairly normal configuration.
Yeah, that's a great point, Director Liu. What I failed to add is that at eastbound milepost 123.5, we'll have the lane closed there for that construction work, but that lane closure is also going to extend almost a mile to the east in order to encapsulate what Director Liu referred to as milepost 124.5. There's a section of the Colorado River that is adjacent to the bike path and eastbound I-70. The water levels are still high, and the debris flow in the river is still high, which keeps that water diverted over towards eastbound I-70. Our engineers were able to inspect it from what they could We believe that the infrastructure is sound, but until we are able to get our eyes exactly what has occurred down adjacent to the river, we're going to keep one lane through that and push it to the north or the left lane through there. So we're going to extend that closure through there in order to get the I-70 open on the eastbound side, but also to continue our inspections in the future. So once that debris and water is cleared, we can fully assess that area.
Keith, I see Tracy answered the question in the text box, but can you just address that quickly for folks listening?
What is the question?
And I'll just read it out, Keith, for you. The fairly normal configuration you referred to, is that still limited to one lane in each direction through the whole canyon or just in parts?
Yeah. I touched a little bit on that. The main closures will be at 123.5. So one lane in each direction on their respective decks. So the top deck westbound, that'll be one lane. The bottom deck eastbound, that'll be one lane at 123.5. That closure will extend to that eastbound closure at 123.5 will extend out to 124.5. Those will be permanent closures for over the next several months. Then we will have periodic closures outside of the hours of 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. in order to do single lane closures to continue to clear material from behind the barriers, to continue to clean storm drain systems, to really try to reestablish the area adjacent and the topography adjacent to I-70 back to its pre-event conditions.
But just to provide kind of a concise answer on that precise question, it's just in parts. It's basically this roughly 1 mile stretch. There may be periods where we have to do some mitigation in other parts of the canyon, but by and large, you're going to have like a 1 mile work zone in the canyon, roughly.
Correct.
Thanks. Next, we have Spencer Wilson with his hand raised. Spencer, please go ahead.
Yep, my signal's kind of weak, so if I have a problem getting heard, let me know. My question was going to focus on if there was a conversation about keeping this closed to help speed up the rebuilding effort, and if that discussion did happen, how did we end up where we ended up?
I think Director Liu, do you want to take that, or would you like me to answer?
Go for it.
Yeah. I would say, Spencer, that conversation did not occur. If we were to keep, we would be looking at weeks, maybe even into the month to keep this fully closed in order to rebuild this. We find it in the best decision in the best interest to keep to get one lane minimum open through the canyon to return the commerce and the vehicles to through there. We have understood the impacts of this detour route. We fully believe that if traffic does back up, say 20 to 30 minutes with that single lane closure at certain times during the day, that is a lot better than going the alternative routes around this. So it's kind of looking at both situations and trying to understand. So we really feel confident that this is the best decision to alternate lanes in order to rebuild this infrastructure within the canyon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Next, going through a number of questions coming in the chat. Ray Urku, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. I think I had you next in line if you're able to unmute and ask your question.
Absolutely. No, you got it right on the dot. Thank you so much. Ray Urku with the Glenwood Springs Post-Independent. Sort of the piggyback off the last question there. It seems as though some GPS systems are a little bit inaccurate in sending some motorists on wild goose chases. Just recently, we had a commercial passenger bus that got stuck in the flat tops that needed to be rescued. Do you guys have any advice to motorists who think they can use GPS to circumvent some of the closures, or excuse me, the one lane situation in Glenwood Canyon? What is your advice to them, to those people who do like using GPS, and sometimes those GPS systems can be inaccurate?
I can take that one. It's a fantastic question. And, GPS is an incredible tool that is invaluable for drivers, particularly when you don't know the area well. But it doesn't replace common sense in terms of picking a route, particularly when driving through the mountains. I would say that drivers should be very careful about any route that doesn't sort of look like a major highway that routes you over mountain passes and otherwise. Always, check CoTrip for information on the status of the state highways. But I think for those secondary routes, really make sure that you understand where the GPS is sending you if you're going to follow a route that doesn't follow intuitive logic in terms of the obvious major roads. Some of the apps will tell you if a route is unpaved, not all of them. And if it says that, it usually means it. So really, I think particularly for folks who are driving in terrain that they're not familiar with, be very, very careful to make sure that you're truly prepared for the places where GPS is taking you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ray. Next on the list I'm tracking, I've got KDVR, if you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, sorry for the delay there. Jesse seemed to have asked and answered my question pretty well, with just the timeline for the second lane. I'm just curious, where does this kind of historically rank when it comes to like CDOT's hardest technical cleanups or projects?
Hardest technical project cleanups or projects. I really can't speak to the history of CDOT on that one, but what I can speak to is this is one of the largest and single most intense storms that has occurred within the Glenwood Canyon in years. The destruction from this event has never been seen before in this canyon. Technically, we will get this fixed. This is something that is fixable. It's just going to take a little bit of time with the phasing component that we have to maintain traffic through here. We understand the scope is right now as we see it. Once we get our contractor in there and our engineers further uncovering material, we still haven't found the bike path at 123.5. So we're not sure exactly where it's located. We're missing a couple culverts at that location as well. So once our contractor gets in there and starts taking a look at that area, a lot more answers and a lot more known items will be found. That's exactly why we're estimating at Thanksgiving. What we don't want to say is we can get this accomplished in a month or month and a half. We want to make sure that we understand the scope, we get the right decision made, the right design made, and get this reconstructed through that corridor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add to that with respect to the question about sort of where this ranks, that the Forest Service is categorizing the rainfall and mudslide event that occurred as a 500-year event. They've described having modeled the mudslide risk after the fires as a 100-year risk, and that what happened this season with the most intensive rainfalls was a 500-year event. So that just gives you a sense of perspective too. And if I may quickly just address the question that I see in the chat box, confirming that it will be a normal 4-lane configuration other than the work zone, yes.
Thanks, Director Liu. And I'll just quickly pause if Aspen Public Radio has a follow-up there, because I know we've had a little back and forth. But seeing none, we've got a few hands raised. So get ourselves over to Jennifer Meckles. Jennifer, go ahead.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Sound great.
Great. This was addressed a little bit earlier, but just to be more specific, Mother Nature may rain again. We talked about big rock slides, but are you guys concerned at all about just even some of these smaller rain events leading to more small base slides where we're going to go back and forth with every couple of days a closure? Like, should drivers be anticipating that until the full completion of the project around Thanksgiving? And then the second part of that question is, I know this summer CDOT's been staging crews anytime we have flash flood, warning watches in like various phases. Will that continue until the full completion of the project?
Hey, Shoshana, do you want me to
Yes,
grab that one?
Go for it, Mike.
Jennifer, really, to be honest with you, nothing's going to change from the protocols that we had set forth with the watches in the mornings. One of the things that we've been discussing with our CSP partners and others is to take a look at that and make sure that that's still accurate, working with the National Weather Service and the things that we're doing. But those protocols will still be in place. Our folks will still be on standby. If it does go into a watch or a warning, we will still follow those same protocols. And again, until we get out of the monsoon season, if we get that event at the quarter inch or a half inch in that 15-minute period, there's still the possibility of those material slides coming down and impacting the roadways. I don't know that it's specific to any one location in the canyon. We had during the last big event, we had 13 different locations that slid and put material on the road. So we will have to watch Mother Nature, and we'll have to watch the skies just like we have been, regardless of the situation and regardless of the construction that's ongoing at the 123.5. Did you get everything, or did I miss part of that?
Yes, and you and I were the folks who spoke last time about that very protocol. So thank you. I just wanted to know if drivers should basically be thinking, just because we're going to see lanes open, some of the same things may still be touch and go. So.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Mike. Next on my list, I've got Nate Miner. Nate, please go ahead and unmute.
Hey, yeah, Nate Miner, Colorado Public Radio. I want to ask Shoshana about the two stories that Channel 7 and Channel 9 published last night about Independence Pass. And really, I'm interested in why, if there was a reason that CDOT couldn't limit or close Independence Pass, short of what seems to be, deceiving the app companies, I guess my question is, why did it have to come to that? And the second question is, I'd just be interested in your reaction to that incident. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. And just to sort of touch on the context for this, last summer when we were facing the fires, there was a couple of days when there was very, very heavy and very dangerous traffic on Independence Pass, and there was a quite treacherous scenario where a lot of CMVs and a lot of vehicles that exceeded the size limit for Independence Pass were breaking the rules. In order to kind of, break a pattern that was becoming very problematic, CDOT, for a short amount of time, closed Independence Pass and had it registered as closed on CoTrip, but allowed it to be used only by local travelers. So what happened in the event last week was that there was a bit of a miscommunication, candidly, that some of the team at CDOT tried to revert to a procedure that had been discussed last year, but the context was different and it wasn't the right solution for this year. So we did change it back quickly, but the reason why it happened in the first place was because of this procedure that had happened during a different situation that had some similarities but some differences last summer. Upon reopening it, CDOT actually implemented a range of new safety measures that have been working pretty well. At the Narrows and Independence Pass, there have been temporary traffic lights installed, and that's really helping to meter the traffic. We have checkpoints at both ends of the pass that are helping to make sure that we don't have vehicles that exceed the limits, sort of transgressing those rules and going into it. I believe that we've gotten even some outside support from the Guard on that matter. And, it's really helping to make sure that the traffic issues that in the past are not like what happened in that very challenging situation last year. So, I think just, there was a mistake by staff and how it was listed. And, again, we changed it quickly because that wasn't the right way to proceed, but it was not motivated by anything but the best of intentions and trying to replicate something that had been a solution in a different circumstance last year. I think in terms of the choice to keep it open, our posture in this event is that every road that is a, important alternate route for the kinds of traffic for which it's appropriate should be kept open, right? We made a very hard choice to suspend traffic on US 50 in order to make that available. It's going to result in delaying the completion of that project. So it wasn't something we wanted to do, but we believe that given the, very significant inconvenience of this closure, we just have to do everything we can to keep the other routes available to travelers. Independence is different than some of the others because of the size limits, but, with these appropriate safety measures in place to keep the vehicles that shouldn't be in the pass out, and to help to manage one way in each direction in the narrows, we're seeing it working, and we're keeping a close eye on the situation.
Thanks, Nate. Keeping it in order, I've got Jason Luber next on my list if you want to unmute. Go ahead, Jason.
Hi, Matt. Thanks. And hi, Shoshana. Will there be any discipline following up on the same report that we did yesterday? Is there going to be any discipline or changes with the procedure going forward? And do you feel that it's fully acceptable to manipulate the GPS companies and apps in this way going forward? Is this something that will maybe be a part of procedure going forward with CDOT?
So I can take that. Like what I just answered was our posture on what we're doing right now, right? It's open, it's listed on CoTrip as open, and CDOT's position is that if it's actually open, unless there's a need for it to be closed right now, it's open. The issue with the apps is a more complicated one. I mean, there's not an easy way. The conversation we were all having earlier about apps sending people over roads that they shouldn't be on is an issue that's complicated, not just for Colorado, but for a lot of states that have difficult mountain terrain. I mean, there are apps that will send people without four-wheel drive over unpaved roads in very, very steep grades, and it's hard to there's not a great way to manage the fact that when that happens, it can put drivers in a dangerous situation. So again, I would say that nothing you saw there. I wouldn't have characterized it as lying to the GPS. I think it was it was more a question about whether the policy that had been employed last year, which actually was to close it except for local traffic, was the appropriate policy for this year. So I think I think it's that is more what happened.
With all due respect, Shoshana, telling the public or GPS apps and tweeting out that there's a mudslide when there really isn't a mudslide is false reporting.
The CoTrip at that time, I don't, and Matt, correct me if I'm incorrect here, but I don't believe that the CDOT CoTrip update said that there was a mudslide at that particular moment.
There was a tweet that was sent out that Pitkin County then checked out and said that this was unverified, and Pitkin County, which you can also address, then had to retract their tweets because they were retweeting what the operations center had sent out about a mudslide that happened on Independence Pass. And so then Pitkin County is caught in a situation where they're sending somebody up to find out if there's a mudslide, and there isn't.
Look, I think that given what's been going on over the last 2 weeks, there's a lot of real-time information. It's not the first time that in a scenario where things are changing very rapidly, there's a moment of confusion. It got corrected, and CDOT's posture is that the road is open and that the road needs to be listed as open when it's open. What happened last year was that there was a decision to close the road with the exception, that local traffic was allowed through even though it was closed. They weren't like circumstances, and it was corrected.
But we're not talking about last year. We're talking about this year and this week.
I think that moving forward. Can you hear me?
Yes, Shoshana. Go ahead. Yeah, we're not talking about last year. We're talking about this year and this week.
Right. I'm explaining, Jason. I'm explaining that what happened was the result of some confusion between the scenario last year and the scenario this year. I'm not saying that it was the right decision. I changed it, and as you read in yesterday's reporting, that's not the position of CDOT right now. But moving forward, the road's going to be listed as open when it's open, unless it has to be closed for certain periods of time for a specific situation.
And did you hear from Pitkin County about what happened?
I'm looking around. I don't know that we tracked that, but I'm checking our other presenters as well.
I don't believe we did, Matt. To be honest with you, I'm not sure that they reached out, at least to Keith and I.
Okay. Next on the list I'm tracking is Patty Nieburg. Hope I got that last name right. If you could go ahead and unmute and read the recording, can grab your question as well.
Sure, yeah, Nieburg. I'm with the AP. Keith mentioned that that inspection showed that the structures were structurally sound. So can you just clarify which parts you were saying are considered structurally sound as of now?
Yeah, the inspections that were completed were all at milepost 123.5. They were visual inspections confirmed by the as-built drawings and the information, the historical information that CDOT has. So when we take a look at that, we have zero concern of the stability of milepost 123.5 or at 124 point, I think it's eastbound 124.5. The rest of the roadway really suffered from a lot of material within the road. So that was where we had to clear a lot of the material out, haul it out to the various locations. But from an infrastructure perspective, it was really two main locations that we were concerned. And our engineers, our inspectors were all able to confirm that we're good to go for Saturday.
Thanks, Patty. Continuing to go through, Marianne, I had you as having your hand raised again, but I'm not seeing that anymore. I'm not sure if you had another follow-up or if it already got answered.
Actually, I do. I was kind of curious about the bike path. Shoshana, I think, mentioned that it's still buried, and there was a question about whether it's even there anymore if it got taken out completely. Can you address that?
I can take that one, Matt. Marianne, there's approximately 10 locations right now that the bike path has debris on it, or material as we're referring to it now. But that's a lower priority for us to get that cleaned off currently, just to try to get the traffic reestablished in the canyon. Keith referenced the 124.5. It's actually the 124.2 where our other concern is at the moment. And part of that is that portion of the bike path is underwater. There's 2 or 3 places right now where the bike path is submerged. And just to give you all a frame of reference, in the springtime when we have high water, the majority of the bike path from the Hanging Lake rest area, basically at the Shoshone Dam, down to the Shoshone Power Plant, from approximately the 123 to the 125, a majority of the bike path is underwater during high water. We have it closed on and off in the springtime. So it's a normal occurrence for us to not necessarily be able to see the bike path. The only thing that we're concerned with right now is the material flows that are in the river and the direction that the channel of the river is going currently in the 124.2 area. We can't get in there to inspect that quite yet, but the main damage to the bike path is, in a lot of places, is the railing, where it's up against the Colorado River. But for the most part, the bike path is still there. The 123.5, just due to the amount of material that's on top of it from that slide, we just haven't been able to dig down to it yet to give you a good answer on whether it still exists.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. Next on my list, I've got Steve Stager. Steve, go ahead and unmute if you can.
Matt, thank you. Question for Director Liu. I don't mean to belabor the point, but I do want to ask, a lot of people are reading this story, they're seeing the story about the alerts, and they're wondering, why should the public trust these alerts about closures in the future? And what does it say about the department that, in a sense, it seems that you didn't really tell the truth here about why the road was closed?
I think there was absolutely, miscommunication about what was going on. I think what, as I said before, that the issue was less about not saying what was accurate information than about there being sort of 2 kinds of circumstances, and staff, again, without clearance, and it was a decision that was overruled, made the choice to revert to a protocol that was not the one that the department was employing. There was a protocol that had been employed last year that was sort of the situation. I think I think, and it was, again, it wasn't me who made the decision, thought was analogous, but that to me is different than something being malintentioned. Again, that wasn't the right decision. They made a mistake. They apologized for it. And, in rapid moving situations, mistakes happen. But, I don't think that it was the kind of thing that's sort of systemically representative of anything broader. I mean, the reality is that roads open and close a lot during emergency situations. Think about snow season and how often, a pass or a road will quickly open and close. Occasionally there's even, a mistake about what was initially precipitating it, because sometimes there's actually confusion about it at the moment. I mean, that happens in emergency situations, and it has happened before. And, I don't think it means that there's, a kind of broader issue of public trust with, the apps. I think that they're, again, the staff who were involved in that said that they made a mistake. They moved on. It was corrected quickly. And, I think what we're doing here is explaining, what was going on in the background, and that the intent was only about keeping people safe in a difficult situation.
And can I just ask one follow-up? You talk about the past protocol. Was the past protocol directly to say that there's a natural disaster when there's just a traffic jam, or what was the past protocol?
I can't speak to exactly how that comment made it onto the the servers. Again, it wasn't something that was clear by any of us. What the past protocol had to do with Independence Pass specifically, and sort of asserting that the pass was closed with the exception that it was open to local traffic. That's all I'm drawing the analogy to. And I can't speak for the content behind that one comment.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Couple questions remaining in the chat. Carla, if you're able to unmute, Carla Distal. Not hearing you, so I'll just go ahead and read it to the group. Is there a projection as to when construction and associated closures will resume on the Highway 50 Little Blue Canyon project?
I could take that one. We're not giving an opening date at this time because the assumption is that it will be closed until we're confident that 70 is stable, and that there's not going to be a redundancy in closures to the traveling public that will make travel more difficult than necessary. At this point, the Little Blue Canyon project is going to bleed over to another season. And that actually gives us some more flexibility about making the choice to open it. I think that there's also a lot of concerns that we're always concerned about harvest season in particular and the needs of ag producers. So, the idea for this season is that, once it's closed, we're going to be in very close contact, particularly with the ag producers, about picking a date to reopen it that doesn't impair their operations.
Thanks, Director Liu. Saw a note from KD&K, but I don't think they had a question there. And Jennifer Meckles, it looks like you had a follow-up if you want to go ahead. Oh, I'll again just read it out the chat. Jennifer was asking if we have a cost breakdown of the cleanup so far, as well as the estimated cost to finish the rest of the rebuild.
I'm so sorry, I stepped away from my computer for a minute, but you have read my question verbatim as I would have asked it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Mike, why don't you touch a little bit on any of the maintenance costs, and I can touch base a little bit on the engineering stuff.
Absolutely. So Jennifer, currently we've been tracking since back on June 26th when we first started getting all of these events that occurred. Right now, we haven't ran costs in the last week just due to the fact that everybody's busy trying to get the road open. But our estimated cost just from our maintenance staff and the support from the other regions when we've been bringing support from around the state to help us get this road open. We're the last actual report that I saw was pulled, we're upwards of $1 million right now. And that's a loose number just due to the fact that not everybody's got all of their stuff in for the last week and a half. So as that progresses, I foresee that number increasing. I don't know how much yet, but I know it'll increase from that number. So, and then I'm going to let Keith talk to the engineering stuff.
Yeah, Jennifer, I would say the best estimates that we have right now are included in the letter that our chief engineer, Steve Harrelson, sent off to the FHWA administrator, John Cater. So that had a pretty good breakdown of how it added up to the 116 million. We're confident that those, there were certain placeholder numbers in those estimates. The ones that are tied directly to infrastructure, we still feel confident in those estimates. I don't want to get into any particulars right now as we are open to bid on some of the repairs. So I want to get through that process before I comment specifically on some numbers. But in the general realm of things, we're fairly accurate with our estimates.
Thank you.
Thanks all. I'm not seeing any additional hands raised or questions in the chat. And know that we're getting late in the afternoon and close to deadlines for folks. From the advisory, you should have contact information and through the rest of our communications for myself, Elise Thatcher, who remains the Incident Command PIO, Stacia Sellers, who is the deputy, and Casey Trulove, who is back joining us on a contract basis through this incident. So please reach out to any of the four of us if there are additional needs. And again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Okay, bye.